All right, welcome back to the Roast It Yourself podcast brought to you by Coffee Bean Corral and Current Crop Roasting Shop. My name is Stephen Burnett with Coffee Bean Corral in Jackson, Mississippi. And with me, as always, is Catherine Mansell, Certified Q Grader and Director of Current Crop Roasting Shop in New Orleans, Louisiana. Catherine, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Lots of big things happening, big things on the horizon that are almost ready to announce.
Oh, okay. So you're going to make these people wait? And
Yeah.
maybe me, because I think I know what you're talking about, but you might have
Yep.
something else up your sleeve? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. All right.
Yep.
You guys got to wait. I'm sorry. You got to wait. You can't have everything right now. You have to wait for your Christmas presents under the tree.
Yep.
You have to wait for big announcements coming from Current Crop Roasting Shop in the near future. Before Christmas, right? Like announced before Christmas? Okay. Good. See? So we got a little something to tide you over until the big man comes. Okay. Now, each week we set aside about 10 minutes to field questions from home coffee roasters and professionals alike about roasting, tasting, and most importantly, enjoying coffee. You can send your questions to questions@riypod.com. That's questions@riypod.com to get a nice shout out from us in an upcoming episode and, of course, to get your question answered. This week's question comes from Joe, and I think this question is like deceptively simple. But I think we can go a lot of directions with it. I think it's going to be helpful to people. So there you go. The other ones aren't helpful at all. This is the first helpful one we've got, I guess. I don't know. Just here's the question. Joe says, good morning. Just started to get into roasting coffee at home. Super fun. Picked up an SR 800 roaster, and I find I get a more consistent roasted batch if I start with a little less coffee. Been roasting about 6 ounces at a time. And keep the fan turned up a bit higher to keep the beans moving a little more. Wondering if there would be any benefit or issue to running the fan high and the heat low for the first few minutes of the roast to dry the beans a bit more, thus getting them a little lighter so they move around a bit once the heat is applied. So far, I've been stopping cooling just after first crack, and now I'm achieving a nice finished bean that has an acidity level that's present but not too wild. Thanks, Joe. Joe, thank you for the question. And like I consider myself like the acidity in your coffee, also present but not too wild. So I'll kick it over to Catherine. Catherine, what do you think about his methodology, and then we can get into some more stuff about actually roasting on different roasters and that kind of thing.
Sure. I think keeping your fan up and keeping the power low to start off with is a great place to begin. It's interesting that he talks about having a smaller capacity with the fresh roast, because I've always used right around 8 ounces, and I've gotten really small samples from farms before, maybe 4 ounces of coffee. And I've grabbed a fresh roast and put in 4 ounces of coffee, and it has not done very well. So I haven't tried the in between 4 and 8, which is 6. So I've never tried that amount. But keeping the fan up and keeping your beans agitated and moving a lot, I think is a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. I would wonder how long the roasts are taking. If he's getting some acidity, that's good. It means he's not totally baking the coffee. But one of the things that people that aren't familiar with the fresh roast don't know about the fresh roast is that the lowering the fan is a big important key to getting the temperature up to a roasting level. You can't just crank the heat up and not lower the fan and expect the coffee to reach that roasting level. So that's an important thing. But it sounds like he's at least getting that, which is good. I think that you have to radically. It's almost like the capacity or what you put in the fresh roast drastically changes the methodology of roasting. Like if you wanted to put 4 ounces in, you could do it. You would just have to really lower that heat and be more gentle with it. Otherwise, it's going to fly through the roasting process. It's going to fly all over the chamber, not ever coalesce, and you actually get an uneven roast that way. And so I think you would have to experiment with it in order to be able to roast less capacity. I've told you guys before, I've admitted I have a problem. I overload the fresh roast with the extension tube. I use 270 grams. I'm not going to do the math to convert to ounces, but the idea is that I end up with about 8 ounces at the end of the roast because I want to end up with half a pound. and it can handle it, at least on most coffees. Some coffees it has a hard time getting the ball rolling in the beginning, and that seems to be Joe's primary concern, is
Yeah.
making sure that the bean will rotate. So
Yeah.
I'll say one more thing on this, and then I want to talk. I think the issue is actually really helpful because uh, capacity on roasters is something that a lot of people, they either don't understand it at all, or they have like a programmed 80% of capacity rule that is just on the internet in roasting circles. And I think neither of those are unhelpful when you come to buying a new roaster. So we'll talk about it in a second. But one thing I want to say is that Joe's kind of landed on something interesting in that he's making sure that he's evacuating moisture quickly during that drying process, and then increasing temperature and increasing the heat to do that. So I learned this. I read an article about this once, and I don't know where it is. It's out there. It exists, and they found that when they were studying this, like roasting one coffee bean at a time in a special machine in a lab. Okay, they found that what you could extend the drying phase, that very beginning phase before browning, for as long as you wanted, and it doesn't affect the coffee at all. You could do it really quick, you could do it really, really slowly, and it doesn't affect the flavor because all that's really happening in that stage of the game is the bulk of the moisture is getting evacuated. However quickly that happens doesn't not doing a lot of chemical changing, you're just evacuating water. That's what I read. Correction. That's what I understood of what I read. So if I'm wrong about that, I apologize. That's what the comments are for, guys. Get in there. But anyway, it's kind of cool to think you could actually stretch the coffee roasting time in the beginning, and not have it affect the overall performance of the coffee bean in the roaster.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to talk about roast capacity as a variable. Catherine, we were talking before the call about the different roasters we've got. You use the bullet quite a bit. What do you load into the bullet? What is your typical roast in a bullet roaster?
24 ounces. So about a pound and a half is my sweet spot.
Okay.
Of course, you can put 2.2 pounds in it. You could roast it at capacity, but what I have found when trying to do that is the preheat temperature that I need for a full 2.2 pound roast is really high. And if it's not really high, the roast gets really, really long. And then the cool down time between the first roast and the second roast is substantially longer than if my preheat temperature is somewhere around like 464, 482 when I do a pound and a half. So if I need exactly 2 pounds done, and I don't have a sort of time frame, then I can do that high preheat temperature, load it in, have a tad bit longer of a roast, and be finished for the day. But if I am roasting all day like I was yesterday, we had 20 pounds of different roast to orders from the
Wow.
website and in the store. So I was roasting all day.
Yes.
And my sweet spot for consistently roasting all day on a small batch roaster is a pound and a half, because the roasts are incredibly consistent, and especially if I'm doing the same bean over and over, I'm running the same profile, making the same changes through each one. But the time in between, the cool down of the roaster without that preheat being so high, that sweet spot is quite under capacity for the bullet.
Yeah. No, no, no. I did the math. You're at 0.68%.
Yeah.
Okay. No, sorry, 6.8%.
Yeah.
6.8%. I'm gonna get it. Uh, Wait, no, 68%. You guys, this is
68.
why I'm not a
68. Yeah.
mathematician. Okay, you're almost 70% of the roast. None of that sounds right in my head. I'm looking at the calculator. That sounds right.
Right.
68% of the roast capacity.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier that the common, rule of thumb is 80%. So I use
Yeah.
the Toledo roaster a lot, the M10, which is a 2.2 kilo capacity. And according to my calculator, 80% of that is 960. Now I've run it full, and I had the same experience of it taking a lot longer than I wanted it to take to roast the coffee.
Yeah.
I've run it at 80%, and it did fine. It did fine, but I didn't feel that I had the flexibility to play with the coffee and make some big changes. I was having to kind of keep it pretty close to maximum energy to get a roast done in the time that I wanted to get done. And so my typical roast in the Colito is 800 grams, which is less than that 80%. But that gives me a good output, and yet I have the ability to do some real profiling. I'm not maxing it out as I, like if you put your pedal to the metal trying to get somewhere. I don't feel like I have to do that with 800 grams on the Colito. And so I
Yeah.
think that's an important thing. If you go to buy a coffee roaster, keep in mind that whatever the capacity is, now it's a little less true with these air roasters, it's a little less true with home roasting devices. But with the big commercial stuff, with the ones that are, 1, 2, 3, 10 kilos, you're not going to overload them. And you're probably not going to load them to capacity as a matter
Yeah.
of course. You're probably going
Yeah.
to have to find a sweet spot in terms of the roast capacity, what you put into it, the roast to
Yeah.
charge, in order to make that work. And I think that's something that needs to be experimented with. Um, I one thing I caution people about, and this happens in the home roasting space, is we give people at Coffee Bean Corral, we give them a pack of half pound samples when they get their roaster. And so if you roast, if you've got that half pound sample pack and you have your little SR 800, you can do a half pound at a time. If you're really conservative and you want to really get the hang of the roaster first, some people will do a little 100 gram here, 100 gram there, 100 gram there, and they'll try and practice the roast with a very small capacity, thinking, I don't want to waste coffee. If I tear this up and don't do a good job, I don't want to burn a whole half pound.
Yeah.
If you do that, you're changing a huge variable. You can't just take that same methodology you use to roast 100 grams and then go to roast more than double that with a half pound, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's something that's important. It is a variable. It's one that can be changed. It's one that can be tweaked, but it's not something that you should be changing all the time. I think it's something that after you know the machine and after you know the coffee, then you can ask the question of, man, it feels like it's taken a long time to get this roast done. Maybe I could go back on capacity and get a better roast. What do you think about that,
Yeah.
Catherine?
I think that's a great sort of idea to set everything up and have something that's consistent. And then once you see what's happening and have a little bit more understanding of what's taking too long or what's going too quickly, you can go back and change your capacity. But I think Joe's experimenting and creating something that he likes,
Yeah,
especially if you're picking up acidity, because in an air roaster, depending on the guide that you're using or your way of roasting, whether it's fast and hot or low and slow, sometimes you can lose acidity altogether. So he's found a good spot where he is enjoying the coffee, using less capacity, and finding a system that works for him.
100%, 100%. I think
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that he's already kind of gotten to the point where a lot of people don't get, which is to experiment with the charge weight. With that,
Mm-hmm.
most people kind of we want to be told, and we were discussing earlier, like we there's not a variable of coffee roasting that we would lay down a firm law on. You must always do X, Y, or Z. You must always drop at this temperature for a medium roast. You must always increase the heat at this point, right? There's a lot of ifs and a lot of variables, and coffees are different and roasters are different. So why would there be a one size fits all? You must put X% of the total manufacturer suggested capacity in the coffee machine every time. There's not going to be that. It is a variable. It's a slippery variable. It's kind of more of an advanced move to mess with it. But I think that once you have the hang of the roaster and once you kind of know the coffee, then you can evaluate that as one lever to pull. I just
Yeah.
wouldn't change it a lot. I wouldn't change it all the time. I would experiment a little bit, find something that works, and then keep going with it. Otherwise, you're throwing a huge wrench into your own kind of instincts for coffee roasting, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is that's our perspective on that. Joe, very good, deep question, and
Yeah.
this is a great thing to be already experimenting with as a newbie roaster. So congratulations on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Catherine, we obviously didn't cover everything. right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
no, we didn't. I think we made people mad. I think my math skills made people mad. They're like, this guy why are we listening to this dude? He can't even read a calculator. You know what? I don't know either. But your listeners, if you have a different perspective or think we dropped the ball on something, left out part of an answer, failed to be helpful in some way, don't just sit there. Fill in the gaps. Like help us out. Help Joe out. Get in there and tell him what you think. If you haven't ever tried messing with the charge weight of your roaster, maybe you could give it a shot and let us know how that goes in the comments. I mean, it's definitely a variable that you can mess with and it can be helpful for your roast. And we hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed making it, which is a ton. And if you did, please leave a rating or review on whatever platform you found us on. We're excited to watch the Roast It Yourself podcast continue to grow and reach more people and introduce them to coffee roasting, just people just like you. And we cannot do that without you. Also, be sure to follow our social media accounts. I forget to say this sometimes, but we have like Facebook accounts for like Current Crop and the Roast It Yourself podcast and Coffee Bean Corral. Get on there and follow us. You'll see like deals and stuff and photos and fun things. And it's a great way to get involved in the community and kind of like level that up. You can also ask questions in there, just saying. But we could not do the podcast here without the folks to handle our audio and video and graphic work for the show. We really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much for what you do to make us look and sound good. Remember, dear listener, to send any questions you have about coffee in general or coffee roasting in particular to questions@riypod.com. Otherwise, have a great day and happy roasting.
Thanks, Joe.